Nolan simply wanted to nourish his children and bask in the sunshine. But when two sheriff's deputies requested identification for a family barbecue, they had no clue they were confronting an FBI agent specialized in civil rights enforcement. Crestwood Meadows wasn't upscale, merely a green expanse alongside a gentle curve of the Ashley River. A destination where families arrived to shed the week's burdens, the sort of location where portable chairs triumphed over picnic tables and the aroma of charcoal indicated you'd found the perfect spot. That's where the Dandridge family appeared every alternate Saturday with clockwork regularity. Nolan Dandridge positioned himself beside the barbecue grill, dressed in a simple white t-shirt and basketball shorts, meticulously attending to a rack of ribs using metal tongs. He wasn't a showy individual, there was no need to be. His expertise with marinades spoke volumes. "Don't allow those to become dry," Tiana shouted from the portable table as she unwrapped a tray of sweet corn, her golden hoop earrings reflecting the sunlight. "You always attempt to accomplish too much simultaneously." Nolan grinned without raising his gaze. "Woman, when have I ever ruined ribs?" Their daughter Kendra rolled her eyes and pulled her curls into a ponytail as she observed her younger brother Jalen throwing a frisbee toward a distant tree, completely missing the target. He squealed regardless, chasing after it with both arms extended like a goalkeeper. "You two better consume food today," Tiana declared, pointing a serving spoon at both children. "I didn't peel all these potatoes for you to survive on juice pouches." Kendra collapsed into a lawn chair and inserted her earbuds. "You're the one who prepares enough food for 20 people." Tiana smiled, dismissing the remark. "I cook for my family the way I love them. Y'all eat like I don't." Nolan chuckled, flipping the ribs again. The grill sizzled and crackled. Everything about the afternoon moved slowly and easily. No one was rushing, just regular South Carolina summer heat pressing down like a warm palm, children's laughter carrying across the grass. Other families scattered throughout the park. A group of cousins throwing a football, a couple grilling hot dogs near the swings, a few elderly folks playing dominoes under a covered pavilion. Nobody was creating trouble. Nobody was loud. "Jalen," Nolan called, his voice cutting through the breeze. "Stay where I can see you." "I'm just retrieving my frisbee," Jalen shouted, his voice cracking with excitement. "Don't go beyond the trees, understand?" Nolan added, "Okay, okay." The boy waved back. Kendra glanced at her father, annoyed. "You treat him like he's 5. He's 7. That's close enough," Nolan said. There was something comforting in the routine of it all, a kind of rhythm they'd built over years of these afternoons. Grill, laugh, eat, clean up, go home. No schedules, no phones, no distractions. Tiana pulled out a mason jar of lemonade from the cooler and handed a cup to Nolan. "Don't let that fire die. You know how long these ribs take." He took the drink and clinked the cup against hers. "This isn't my first time, I know. That's why I married you," she said, smirking before slipping a deviled egg into her mouth. Nolan shook his head, still smiling. "Woman, been roasting me since '03. As a family, they weren't perfect, just authentic. The kind of people who laughed hard, argued loud, and loved even louder." Nolan had spent the previous year buried in work. Long days at the Charleston field office, nights at his laptop writing reports. So these weekends meant something, they were sacred. He glanced toward the tree line where Jalen was running back with the frisbee, breathless and proud. Behind him, a squirrel darted up a tree and disappeared. "Look, I caught it," Jalen yelled, holding up the disc like a trophy. "You didn't catch it, you picked it up," Kendra mumbled without looking up from her phone. "I still got it," he declared, collapsing into the grass. Nolan leaned back, cracked his knuckles, and looked over at Tiana. "You hear that? Our boy's a champion." "He better be," she said. "He eats like one." They both laughed again. It was the kind of sound that only comes from peace, from knowing you're exactly where you're meant to be. But a few minutes later, a low rumble from the parking lot broke the rhythm. Tires rolled slowly across gravel, then onto the grass, closer than any vehicle should be. Nolan looked up. Who's driving on the field? Tiana followed his gaze to a Charleston County Sheriff's Department cruiser. It stopped about 15 yards from their grill. 2 deputies stepped out. One adjusted his belt, the other kept his hand on his radio. Neither of them smiled, and that's when everything began to shift. The 2 deputies walked with slow, deliberate steps, not rushed, not casual, just controlled, like men already certain they were walking into a problem. One was tall and pale, late 40s maybe, with sharp features and mirrored sunglasses that didn't quite hide how he was sizing up every face. The other, younger and broader, had a close-shaved head and the kind of expression that gave away nothing, not a hint of friendliness. "Afternoon," the older one said, scanning the table, the food. Then Nolan. "You folks got a permit for this gathering?" The question landed like a stone in the middle of a pond. Nolan straightened up, wiped his hands on a towel, and stepped from behind the grill. "We're not hosting an event, sir, just a family cookout." "That right?" the younger officer said, eyeing the trays and folding chairs. "Looks like more than a family thing." Tiana stood up, instinctively placing a hand on Kendra's shoulder. "It's just us and the kids. No music, no loudspeakers, no crowd. We're here every other weekend." "Ma'am, I didn't ask you," the older one said, his voice flat. Kendra immediately pulled her earbuds out and looked up at her mom. Jalen stopped chewing his hot dog and stood frozen mid-bite. Nolan didn't react, not with his face anyway. He'd been in enough interrogations to know the energy behind every word. He stayed calm, steady. "Well," Nolan replied, "this isn't a public event, just a meal." "Got ID on you?" the younger officer asked. Nolan blinked. "For what purpose? Do we need to confirm who we're talking to for a barbecue?" The officer didn't answer, just looked at him. "So, are you telling him you're not required to provide identification if you're not being lawfully detained or suspected of committing a crime?" Nolan said, his voice still calm. "You're aware of that, right?" The older officer squinted behind his sunglasses. "You're getting smart with us?" "I'm answering your question." Tiana's fingers tightened on Kendra's shoulder. Her daughter hadn't moved an inch. The air felt different now, thicker, heavier. The younger officer stepped past Nolan and moved toward the table, peering into the foil pans. "What's in here?" "Food," Tiana snapped, stepping forward. "That's my potato salad. Please don't touch it." "I'm not touching anything, ma'am, just checking." He turned slightly and pressed a button on his shoulder radio. "Unit 7, go ahead and run a vehicle check. Black SUV, South Carolina plate 6 Tango 29. Nolan's SUV. Tiana exchanged a look with him. It was quick but full of messages. He gave a tiny nod. He saw it all, felt it too. Kendra whispered, "Are we in trouble?" "No, baby," Nolan said softly. "We're just fine." But his body was tense now, legs slightly apart, hands in clear view, not raised, not hidden, just visible. "I'm gonna ask again," the older officer said. "Let me see some ID." Nolan inhaled through his nose. "What's your reasonable suspicion here?" The officer took a step closer, just shy of being too close. "You're obstructing." "No, sir," Nolan replied. "I'm standing still. I'm speaking clearly. I haven't moved. I haven't touched anything. I've answered your questions. I'm not obstructing." The man's jaw flexed. His sunglasses reflected Nolan's image, arms at his sides, brow furrowed, not angry, just ready. Kendra stood now too, chest tight, her fingers trembling. "Mom," she said quietly, "can they make us leave?" Tiana didn't answer. The younger deputy walked back toward his partner. "Plates registered to a Nolan Dandridge, Mount Pleasant address." "That's me," Nolan said. "You sure about that?" The older one said, tapping the name into his tablet. "Got anything to prove it?" That's when Nolan sighed just a little and reached for his wallet. Slowly, deliberately, he took out his ID, but not just his driver's license. He handed over a federal badge and credentials. The older officer blinked, took it, read it, then looked at Nolan again, slower this time. Special agent. He muttered. Supervisory special agent. Nolan corrected. Internal Affairs Bureau. Silence. Long, thick silence. The younger deputy looked over the badge, then to his partner. You serious? Nolan didn't answer. Tiana folded her arms, her expression like stone. She said nothing, but her eyes said everything. The officers looked at each other. Didn't realize, the older one muttered. Apologies, sir. You didn't ask. Nolan replied. Just doing our jobs. The younger one added. I've seen that line used before, Nolan said, usually when someone gets hurt. The officers lingered a few seconds longer, offered awkward nods, then turned back toward their car. No more words, no citation, no questions, just silence and gravel under boots. Jalen, still holding his hot dog, finally asked, what just happened? Nolan crouched down, eyes level with his son's. Nothing you did, but you need to remember what you saw. Tiana's phone was still in her hand. The screen dimmed but recorded steadily. She hadn't moved, she hadn't said a word, but the whole interaction, from the moment the officers stepped out of the car, had been caught in frame, audio crisp, faces clear. She tapped the screen once. You think they saw you recording? Kendra whispered, eyes still fixed on the sheriff's cruiser as it rolled away. I don't care if they did, Tiana muttered. Nolan stood quietly, arms crossed, watching the car disappear back down the hill toward the lot. The park looked the same. Kids still played in the distance. Someone's speaker crackled with an old soul track, but to the Dandridges, everything had shifted. Jalen climbed into one of the folding chairs, confused, chewing his lip. Are we still eating? Tiana glanced at the table, at the ribs cooling under the foil. We should, she said. We're still here. But no one reached for a plate. Kendra folded her arms across her chest. So that's it? They just show up, mess with us, then drive off. That's how it usually goes, Nolan said quietly, eyes still fixed on the spot where the car had vanished. But Dad, they tried to embarrass you. They talked to Mom like she wasn't even. She broke off, furious. I know what they tried to do, Nolan said, his voice low, measured, but there was something else in it now, something heavier. But we didn't give them what they wanted. What did they want? Jalen asked. Nolan didn't answer right away. He looked down at his son, at the ketchup on his chin, the innocence still barely intact. They wanted control, Nolan said finally. They expected fear. Kendra shook her head. That's so messed up. Tiana stepped toward the table, grabbing a stack of paper plates, trying to force normalcy back into the afternoon. Let's eat. We're not gonna let them ruin our day. But when she handed one to Kendra, the girl didn't take it. I'm not hungry, she said. Jalen was picking at a piece of corn now, slower than before, like even he knew something about the energy had shifted. I shouldn't have to record things like this, Tiana said, mostly to herself. I shouldn't have to keep my hand on a phone just in case. Nolan finally sat down, not to eat, just to breathe. He rubbed his forehead with his thumb and closed his eyes for a moment. You know what's messed up? Kendra said again, louder this time. If you weren't FBI, if you were just some guy, they might have arrested you or worse. Nolan opened his eyes. That's why we stay calm. But why should we? She snapped. Why do we always have to be the ones keeping calm? Why can't they keep calm? Because the rules aren't written for us. Tiana's hand paused midair as she reached for a drink. She stared at Nolan, her eyes softening. She knew that weight in his voice. It came out only when he felt trapped. You never talk like that, she said gently. Nolan didn't answer. I mean it, she added. You're always the one telling us not to assume the worst, to give people the benefit of the doubt. He gave a slow, dry laugh. Yeah, and I still believe that. Then what changed? He looked around at his family, at the table, the park. Sometimes, he said, you just get tired of watching your kids see things you hoped they'd never have to. Silence settled between them again, but it wasn't empty this time. It was full of recognition, shared weight. Tiana finally sat beside him. Well, they saw it and they're not the same, Nolan said. They're not. He looked over at Kendra. Her arms were still crossed. She was trying not to let the anger rise to her face, but it was there, swelling tight. You did the right thing, he told her. She blinked, surprised. For what? For paying attention? For asking questions? For caring? Kendra looked away toward the lake. It just feels like it never stops. It doesn't, Nolan said, but neither do we. Tiana reached for her phone again, opened the gallery, and replayed the clip from the beginning. The officers walking up, the conversation, the questions, Nolan's badge. She stared at the screen. What are you gonna do with it? Kendra asked. I don't know yet. You gonna post it? Maybe you should. Jalen looked up from his corn. If people see it, they'll believe you. Nolan raised an eyebrow. And what if they don't? Then we show them again, Jalen said. Tiana looked at Nolan. He gave a subtle nod. She opened the app and pressed share. But what started as a quiet upload would soon turn into something much louder. By the time they got home that evening, the sky had turned a soft orange, and the cicadas were just starting up their nightly chatter. No one spoke much on the ride back. The radio stayed off. Jalen slept with his cheek against the window, and Kendra scrolled through her phone in silence. Tiana uploaded the video as soon as they walked through the front door. No captions, no hashtags, just the raw clip and a short message. This happened today in Crestwood Meadows. My family. No permit, no problem, but they came anyway. Watch for yourself. She set her phone down and started unpacking the cooler. Leftover ribs, the deviled eggs barely touched. She stared at the food, feeling like it came from a whole different life, like they had packed it that morning in some version of the world that didn't exist anymore. Nolan had gone straight upstairs to change. When he came back down, he wasn't in his usual lounging clothes. He'd put on jeans and a button-up. No reason, just needed to feel put together. How long you think before someone says we were overreacting? He asked. Some already are, Tiana said, pointing toward her phone. The comments started 5 minutes in. Any threats yet? Not yet. Give it an hour. He chuckled bitterly and sat down at the kitchen table, staring out the window. Kendra wandered in with her phone in hand. Dad. Yeah. I think it's going viral. He turned to look at her. Like already? She added. One of my friends reposted it, and now some verified person on Instagram just shared it to their story. People are stitching it, commenting like crazy. He didn't say anything right away. He just nodded slowly. Then, without thinking, he reached for the remote and turned on the TV. Local news wasn't covering it yet, but it was only a matter of time. You okay with it? Tiana asked, watching him. I don't know. You showed your badge. You didn't threaten them. You stayed calm. What's there to be nervous about? He looked at her. Because this was supposed to be a moment for us, just us, family time. And now it's evidence. Kendra said. Jalen walked in groggily, rubbing his eyes. What's evidence? Nothing, baby, Tiana said. Eat something. Nolan stood and grabbed a glass of water. He drank the whole thing in one go, then leaned on the counter. You remember that time in college? He said to Tiana. That party where campus police came knocking, and you told them to come back with a real warrant? She smiled faintly. You stood behind me shaking like a leaf. I did not. You absolutely did. Kendra smirked. You're telling me Mom punked out a cop before you did? Let's just say your mom's been about this life longer than me. Tiana raised an eyebrow. I've always known when to record and when to speak, but this is different. This is now. People are watching. I don't want this to become about me, Nolan said. Then make it about all of us, she said. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of what had happened and what was coming finally settling into the walls of the house. Nolan walked over and picked up Tiana's phone. The video had already passed 60,000 views. Comment after comment rolled in. This is exactly what I've been talking about. Why do they always assume we're doing something wrong? Thank God he had that badge. But what if he didn't? This could have gone so differently. Wow. And then mixed in the pushback. Looks like a staged situation. Maybe don't cook out in the middle of a public park without permission. Law enforcement was just doing their job. But this dude's not even really FBI. Nolan handed the phone back. Kendra stared at him. You gonna tell them who you are? He sighed. They already know, but not really. Not what you do, not why you do it. Tiana leaned on the counter beside him. You've spent the last 15 years cleaning up civil rights violations. You've buried yourself in paperwork for people who didn't even know your name. Maybe it's time you tell them. I've never made this job personal, he said, but it is now. The doorbell rang, and everyone froze. Nolan stepped toward the door, cautiously checked the peephole. A reporter from a local station was holding a microphone, a cameraman just behind her. He exhaled long and hard, then opened the door. Mr. Dandridge? That's me. I'm Amber Price with Channel 6. We were sent the video. We'd love to ask a few questions. He didn't answer immediately. He turned back to glance at his family. Jalen was eating again. Kendra stood behind her mom, arms folded, protective. Tiana gave a single nod. Nolan turned back to the reporter. You have 5 minutes. But 5 minutes was more than enough to spark something bigger. The living room was warm under the late evening light, blinds half closed, tension settling like dust. Nolan sat on the couch across from Amber Price, legs crossed, hands resting calmly in his lap. The camera was rolling, red light blinking, while Tiana stood just out of frame, arms crossed. Kendra filmed the interview with her own phone, silent and focused. Amber leaned forward. Mr. Dandridge, your video's now been viewed over 300,000 times since this morning. Can you explain what happened from your perspective? Nolan paused, not to think. He knew exactly what had happened, but to choose his words carefully. Every sentence would be clipped, shared, rewatched. We were having lunch, me, my wife, my kids, that's it. He said, we weren't causing any disturbance. We weren't breaking any law, but 2 deputies decided we were worth stopping. And you identified yourself as an FBI agent? Yes. Do you believe that changed how they treated you? No, he said. I believe it changed how they stopped treating me. Amber raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Nolan leaned forward slightly. If I didn't have a badge, they would have kept pushing, maybe tried to search our car, maybe told us to leave, maybe worse. But a badge made them second-guess the story they were writing about us. Amber sat back. And do you think this was racially motivated? Nolan glanced at Tiana, then looked straight into the camera. I don't think it. I know it. Silent, the only sound was the soft hum of the camera. Well, Amber said, shifting, I appreciate your time. Is there anything else you'd like to say to viewers watching this? Nolan turned to her, then back to the lens. Watch the video. Watch how they speak to my wife, how they speak to me. Ask yourself, would they have said the same things at a cookout with a different family? She nodded. That's all we need. Thank you. The camera shut off. The crew packed up quickly, offered thanks, and left without further small talk. As soon as the door clicked shut behind them, Nolan exhaled. A real one this time, the kind you feel in your chest. Thought you weren't gonna say anything, Tiana said softly. I wasn't. He replied, but it stopped being about just us. You did good, she said. He rubbed his hands together, stood up, and walked over to the sink, pouring a glass of water. I don't like the attention. I know, she said, but the truth doesn't wait for comfort. Upstairs, Kendra was already uploading her own edit of the interview. A clip from the park followed by the sit-down with her dad. She added a caption. He's more than just a badge, he's a dad, and they tried to treat him like a threat. By morning, it would cross 1 million views. But back in the kitchen, Nolan was still pacing. You think it'll blow over? He asked. No, Tiana said, and I don't think it should. He ran a hand across his jaw. I'm not scared of backlash. I just don't want my family in the middle of this." "You didn't put us in the middle," she said. "They did." He nodded slowly, staring out the window. A few kids rode bikes past their driveway, normal life continuing, unaware or maybe uninterested in what was unfolding inside. His phone buzzed. He checked the screen. Text from a colleague. "Just saw the video. Standing with you. Call me if you need anything." Another buzz, this one from a number he didn't recognize. "Would love to have you speak on our panel about policing and bias." Tiana watched him scroll. "You could ignore them." "I could, but I won't." He set the phone down. "No, I won't." That night, after the kids had gone to bed, Nolan and Tiana sat on the back porch. Crickets filled the air. The sky above them was dark but clear. "I thought I could just keep doing the job," he said. "Help fix the system from the inside quietly." "You still can," she said. "But now people know who I am, what I look like, what I stand for. Maybe that's what the system needs." They sat in silence for a while. Then Nolan said, "When I was a kid, my dad told me not to give them a reason." "And now?" Tiana asked. "I think they don't need one." She looked at him carefully. "So what are you gonna do?" He leaned back in his chair. "Not stay quiet." But before he could decide where to speak next, someone else decided for him. By sunrise, Nolan's face was on 3 different news sites. 1 local, 2 national. By lunch, it had climbed to 5. By evening, it was on 23. What started as a shaky clip on Tiana's phone had become a headline. FBI agent harassed by deputies at family barbecue. Some outlets were more cautious, using words like questioned and confronted. Others didn't pull punches. The video had been stitched, cropped, slowed down, and analyzed from every angle. Civil rights lawyers shared it. Teachers played it in class. In one case, it made the front page of a major Charleston paper with a side-by-side of Nolan at the grill and Nolan holding up his badge. His inbox was full, his voicemail maxed out. Even his LinkedIn, which he hadn't touched in a year, had messages from people he didn't know. Some thanking him, others demanding answers. A few were angry, and then came the knock. Not at the door, but on his agency email. Subject: urgent request for internal debrief from Assistant Deputy Director Vernon Slight. Nolan stared at it for a long time before opening the message. SSA Dandridge, please make yourself available for a conference call today at 1600 hours regarding recent media circulation. Be advised this will be considered an internal compliance review. Directives to follow. He closed the laptop slowly. Tiana was in the living room folding laundry while watching the tail end of an interview about their video. "News wants you again," she said without looking up. "NBC this time. They'll have to wait," Nolan muttered. She glanced over. "Something happened. Internals pulling me in. They want to review the situation." Tiana stopped folding. "You think they're gonna suspend you?" "No, but they might ask me to stay quiet." "You're not going to, though?" "No," she nodded. "Good." At 4 p.m. sharp, Nolan sat at his desk, webcam on, posture rigid. On screen, 4 faces blinked in one by one. He recognized them all. 1 from DC, 2 from the regional office, and 1 from headquarters. Only Slight spoke. "Agent Dandridge, this call is being recorded for documentation. Do you consent to proceed?" "Yes. You are currently the subject of widespread media attention due to a video recorded during an off-duty incident. Are you aware of this?" "I am." "Do you acknowledge that the video may reflect on your position with the Bureau?" "I acknowledge that anything I do could reflect on the Bureau." Nolan replied. "Did you instruct your wife to publish the video?" "No. She made the decision on her own." "But you've since commented publicly." "I've been asked. I've responded. I haven't violated any protocols." One of the other faces, a woman from legal affairs, cleared her throat. "We're not accusing you of any misconduct, but we are advising discretion. We've already received inquiries from law enforcement unions. Some are claiming defamation." Nolan raised an eyebrow. "Defamation? I recorded nothing false. Still, we have to consider bureau optics. Slight added. So, the optics of me standing calmly while two deputies escalate a situation that never needed to happen. Nolan asked. There was a pause. Then Slight said, "We're asking that you refrain from further public commentary while the situation is being reviewed." "I understand," Nolan replied, "but I won't apologize for being recorded in my own life." "We're not asking you to apologize." Yet, the call ended with vague assurances and no real answers. Nolan sat in silence for a moment. Then he got up, walked outside, and sat on the porch steps. The sky was soft with clouds, a breeze rustling the crepe myrtle in the front yard. Tiana joined him, handing him a cup of coffee. "They try to pull rank?" she asked. "Not directly, but it's coming." "You gonna stop talking?" He looked at her. "I think they just made me want to talk more." That night, Nolan posted a short video from his own account. A single shot, no music, no effects, just him sitting in the backyard. "My name is Nolan Dandridge. I've worked for the Bureau for 15 years. I believe in law. I believe in order. But I also believe in fairness. What happened to me and my family last weekend wasn't about law or order. It was about assumptions, and I'm done being silent about it." Within an hour, it passed 100,000 views. By morning, the number would triple. But before Nolan could decide where to take this message next, someone from his past reached out and changed everything. Nolan was in the kitchen pouring coffee the next morning when his phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen and paused. The name was familiar, not recent, not casual, but unforgettable. Marlon Vickers, a name he hadn't seen in over a decade. Back in Quantico, Marlon had been the loud one, sharp mind, sharper tongue. They weren't close friends, but they respected each other, the kind of respect you develop during early mornings on the range and long nights combing through case files together. Nolan swiped to open the message. Saw the video. "They're listening now. You should speak where they can hear you. Call me." He stared at the words for a moment, then hit call. Marlon picked up on the first ring. "Dandridge. Been a long time." "It has," Nolan said, sipping his coffee. "Suspicion looks like through your children's eyes." He paused again, let that hang. "So I'm not here to offer solutions. I'm here to remind you that this isn't rare. It's just recorded now." Silence, then applause, not loud, not wild, but steady, real. After the forum, people lined up to shake his hand. Some cried, a few just nodded and walked away. Two moved to speak. Marlon clapped him on the back. "That's what I'm talking about. You're not just telling your story, you're making them listen." But Nolan didn't speak just for the moment. He spoke because something deeper was building, and it wasn't going away. Nolan returned home late Sunday evening, slipping through the front door with his carry-on slung over one shoulder. The house was dark, quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking wall clock in the hallway. Tiana was waiting up for him in the living room, curled under a throw blanket, a half-read book resting on her lap. She didn't speak at first, just watched him drop his bag by the coat rack and kick off his shoes. "How was it?" she asked softly. "Exhausting," he said, easing into the armchair across from her. "But worth it." Tiana set the book aside. "I saw the clip. They aired part of it on PBS." Kendra cried. "Jalen wanted to know why the room got so quiet after you said the part about existing in peace." Nolan closed his eyes for a second. "I didn't plan that line. It just came out. That's why it hit," she said. "You weren't performing. You were telling the truth." But Nolan didn't smile. Instead, he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring down at his hands. "I got a call right before I boarded the plane," he said. "From who?" "Director Beeman." Tiana sat up straighter. "What did he say?" "He said I was making waves, that the Bureau doesn't take official stands on personal experiences. He reminded me of my oath, my confidentiality agreement." She let out a long breath. "They want you to shut up. They want me to remember who signs my paychecks." Silence fell between them, heavy and sharp. Then Tiana said, "Do you want to stop?" Nolan didn't answer immediately. It's not about what I want. It's what happens if I keep going. What it means for the team I lead, the cases I'm assigned, my clearance. So it's your job or your voice? He nodded. That's not a choice, she said, almost to herself. It's one I've made before. Quietly let things slide, focused on the work, not the noise. But now you're the noise, she said. He looked up at her. And part of me hates that. Tiana stood and walked over to him, sitting on the edge of the coffee table so they were face to face. When you walked into that park with us, you weren't Special Agent Dandridge. You were just Nolan, my husband, our kid's father, the man who won't let me season the ribs because I overdo the garlic. That pulled a small grin out of him. She continued, they didn't care who you were. You had to flash a badge to be treated like a person. And now you have a platform. You think this is about ego. You think we want the spotlight. No, he said quietly, but we didn't ask for this. Nolan leaned back and stared up at the ceiling. I've always believed in systems. I still do, honestly. But maybe systems don't change unless the people inside them shake them a little. She raised an eyebrow. That sounds like a man leaning toward doing something big. He chuckled. Or something reckless. Tiana rested her hand on his knee. There's a difference. The next morning, he called in and requested a week of personal leave. It was the first time he'd ever done that without a family emergency. That same afternoon, he got a message from a local university, a professor who taught criminal justice, asking if Nolan would be open to guest speaking in a lecture on systemic bias and accountability. He didn't say yes right away, but he didn't say no either. He sat on the porch later. Jalen curled up next to him with a book about planes, and Kendra was inside blasting music through her headphones as she worked on an English project. He watched the neighborhood, watched the mail truck go by, and watched a neighbor walk their dog. For once, he wasn't rushing anywhere. I keep thinking, he said aloud, what if that badge hadn't been in my wallet? Jalen looked up. What do you mean? What if they didn't believe me? What if things had gone differently? The boy frowned, processing. Would they have taken you away? He asked. Nolan didn't answer. He just wrapped an arm around his son's shoulders and pulled him close. But deep down, Nolan knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was only just beginning. 3 days into his leave, Nolan stood at the front of a crowded lecture hall at Charleston Southern University. The room smelled like coffee and dry erase markers, and students shuffled notebooks as they waited for him to speak. Some were criminal justice majors, a few were political science students, and most had seen the video. Professor Lindsay Abernathy introduced him quickly. We're fortunate to have Supervisory Special Agent Nolan Dandridge with us today. You may know his name from recent headlines, but today he's here to share what it means to work in the system and what it feels like to be failed by it. Nolan took the mic, slowly surveying the rows of young faces, some skeptical, some leaning forward, hungry for answers, all watching. I didn't come here to give a lecture, he began. I'm not here to talk about theory. I'm here to talk about what it feels like when doing everything right still lands you under suspicion. He paused. Last Saturday, I was at the park with my family. Nothing loud, no crowd, just ribs on the grill and my kids tossing a frisbee. Then 2 officers showed up. Nods in the audience. They didn't ask me what was going on. They asked for ID and what we were doing there. One of them walked around the table like he was casing it for drugs. The other ran my plates. All of it without cause. He paced slowly. No notes, no slides, just memory. And when I asked why, they told me to stop being smart. When I pointed out they had no reason to detain us, they started escalating. I had to pull out my badge. Not because I was proud of it in that moment, but because I knew it was the only thing that would make them back off. A few students looked down, uncomfortable. I've spent over 15 years trying to be part of the solution, he continued, but what happened that day reminded me that I'm never just a federal agent. I'm a black man, and that's always the first thing they see. A hand raised near the back. A student in a gray hoodie asked, "Do you think the system can change?" Nolan looked directly at him. Yes, but not by accident, not by silence. Change happens when we stop waiting for the system to fix itself and start holding it accountable from the inside and the outside. Another student raised her hand. What can people like us do? You ask hard questions. He said, you challenge procedures that don't serve everyone. You speak up when things don't sit right, even if it costs you a grade, or a friend, or a job offer. The room went quiet again. He softened his tone. And when you see someone being treated unfairly, don't turn away. You don't need a badge to stand up for someone. You just need a spine. That landed. When the talk ended, students lined up to speak with him. Some asked for advice. Some just wanted to say thank you. One young woman teared up, explaining how her father had gone through something similar but never talked about it. He just came home quiet, she said. I get it now. That night, Nolan sat at the kitchen table, replaying the moment in his head. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt raw, but something inside him had shifted. A clarity that hadn't been there before. I said things today I've never said out loud. He told Tiana as she rinsed dishes at the sink. Sometimes it takes other people listening for us to really hear ourselves, she said. He nodded. I'm gonna keep going, speaking, yes, but not just that. Writing, meeting, talking to people in the department. I want to start something that lasts. Tiana dried her hands and turned to face him. Then do it, but don't do it alone. He looked at her, then toward the hallway where Jalen's laughter echoed faintly from the TV in the den. Kendra's bedroom door was cracked, light spilling out. No, he said, I won't. The next morning, Nolan created a small nonprofit with the help of Marlon Vickers and a few like-minded agents. Line of Sight. Its mission: training officers, educating the public, and giving voice to the experiences that go unheard in back rooms and patrol cars. He didn't care if it got big, he just wanted it to be real. But before he could fully put it in motion, one final visit to the park would bring everything full circle. It had been nearly 3 weeks since the incident when Nolan drove back to Crestwood Meadows. This time, there was no folding table in the trunk, no trays of food or frisbees tossed through the air. Just him, alone with a folding chair in the back seat and a notebook tucked under his arm. The sky was clear, a soft breeze tugging at the branches of the big sycamore, the same tree they had sat under that day. The grass was freshly mowed. Kids played on the far side of the park, chasing each other in fits of laughter. Life moved on. He set up the chair in the same spot, sat down, opened the notebook, and stared at the first blank page for a while. He didn't write, he just sat, letting the sounds of the park roll through his ears. Sneakers thudding against the sidewalk, a dog barking, a grandmother shouting for someone to come get their juice box off the bench. All ordinary, all peaceful. Then he began to write. Not a speech, not a report, just thoughts, questions, things he didn't want to forget. He wrote, what did they see when they walked up to us? What would have happened if I wasn't carrying ID? Why do my kids now pause when they see a patrol car? What's the cost of staying silent? A few pages in, he paused. Someone was approaching. Nolan looked up. It was a man in his mid-30s, wearing a faded baseball cap and pushing a stroller. Beside him, a little girl walked, holding a half-eaten popsicle. The man slowed as he got closer. You the guy from the video? He asked. Nolan hesitated, then nodded. Yeah. The man looked down at his daughter, then back up. Just wanted to say I saw what happened. Sorry you had to go through that. Shouldn't be that way. I appreciate that, Nolan said. The man nodded once, then kept walking. No camera, no handshake, just truth shared in passing. Nolan closed the notebook. A moment later, a familiar voice called out from behind. You thought you'd come without us? It was Tiana's voice. He turned, smiling as his family walked toward him. Tiana in a sundress and sandals, Kendra in denim overalls, phone in hand, and Jalen holding a kite under his arm. You said you were just clearing your head, Tiana added. I was, he said, rising from the chair. Didn't expect company. We thought maybe it was time we took our spot back, she replied, gesturing to the old sycamore. Kendra pulled a blanket from her tote bag and spread it out on the grass. Jalen started assembling the kite. Nearby, Tiana handed Nolan a sandwich wrapped in foil. He looked down at it. "You made ribs. Leftover brisket," she said. "Don't get spoiled." They sat and ate, under the same tree where the world had shifted weeks before, and this time there were no cruisers, no questions, just family back in place. Jalen stood, finally ready. "Dad, help me get this thing in the air." Nolan got up, brushing crumbs off his lap. "Let's give it a shot." They ran across the grass together, laughing as the kite caught a gust and soared higher, tail whipping in the wind. Kendra snapped photos while Tiana watched, her face calm. After a while, Nolan returned to his chair, catching his breath. Tiana sat beside him. "Do you regret it? Posting the video, speaking out?" He shook his head. "Not anymore." She leaned into him. "We're proud of you." He looked out at the park, sunlight catching the curve of the lake, then down at his son dancing beneath the kite, his daughter smiling for real this time. "I used to think staying quiet kept us safe," he said, "but I realize now it just made it easier for other people to stay comfortable." He picked up his notebook, flipped to a fresh page, and started writing again, not because he had to, but because someone else might need to read it one day. And when he finished the last line, he closed it gently and said almost to himself, "We belong here. We always did." To everyone watching or listening to this story, there are moments that ask us to choose between comfort and truth, between silence and impact. Nolan Dandridge didn't ask to be a symbol. He only asked to eat lunch with his family. But what happened that day wasn't just about him. It was about all the unseen stories that never make it to camera. Don't wait to be believed. Don't wait to be interrupted. Speak, record, share. And if this story moved you, subscribe to the channel and pass this message on, because the more voices we raise, the harder they are to ignore. They are to ignore. They are to ignore. They are to ignore.